It seems like everywhere you turn nowadays, people are talking about natural remedies and wellness and all that.
It really is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really gets you thinking about the business side of it, you know?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
what are the market forces at play that are driving this whole trend?
Right.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today,
Okay.
the global homeopathy product market.
Sounds good.
We've got this recent report, and it forecasts, how big this sector is
Okay.
and where it's headed. So
Excellent.
we're going to take a deep dive into that today.
Yeah, this report is really interesting. It kind of gives us a snapshot of this whole trend
Okay.
and looks at, how big is the market right now?
Hmm.
What's it going to look like in about a decade?
Okay.
And then it breaks it down even further,
Okay.
like geographically different parts of the world,
Right.
different types of homeopathic products that are out there,
Uh-huh.
what people are using them for, even where the ingredients come from. So it's a really interesting look at, if you're interested in the business side of natural health,
Yeah.
this is definitely the deep dive for you.
So to kind of set the stage for the scale of what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
this report estimates that in 2025, the global homeopathy market
Mm.
is sitting at about 12,820 million US dollars.
Wow, that's a pretty substantial starting point.
It is a pretty substantial starting point.
Yeah.
And what's even more interesting is the growth that's anticipated.
Okay.
So they're projecting it to reach
Mm-hmm.
33,127.9948 million US dollars by 2033.
Wow, so more than double
Yeah, more than double.
in just 8 years.
That's a huge jump.
It is.
And the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate that they're forecasting, is 12.60% between 2025 and 2033,
Okay.
which really highlights how quickly this market is anticipated to expand.
Yeah, it's not just a gentle incline.
No,
but
it's a surge.
Yeah, a pretty significant surge.
Yeah, so, and just for context, these calculations are based on 2024 as the base year, with the forecast extending from 2025 through 2033.
All right.
So that gives us the timeline.
Yeah, good context.
And this is really up-to-date information because the report data was updated in February of 2025.
Oh, wow. So this is
So this is hot off the presses.
very current.
Yeah, so we're getting a really, up-to-the-minute snapshot.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so we noted that 12,820 million US dollar market size for 2025,
Right.
and that 12.60% CAGR.
Yeah.
What else stands out to you when you look at the overall global market for homeopathy products?
Well, keeping those figures in mind,
Mhm.
provides a really strong foundation, like 12.60% CAGR really underscores,
Yeah.
the energy behind this market.
Yeah.
If we kind of connect this to like broader trends in global healthcare, I think it suggests that more and more people around the world are, becoming comfortable with and integrating homeopathic options into their, healthcare routines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into the regional breakdown now.
Okay.
So how does this report break things down geographically?
Okay.
North America is highlighted as a major player, right?
Yeah. North America is really leading the way right now, accounting for over 40%
Wow.
of the global market share in 2025. So that translates to a market size of 4,743.40 million US dollars.
Huge.
Big numbers.
Yeah.
What's interesting though is while that's still a very substantial market, their projected CGR is a bit lower
Okay.
than the global average at 11% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so North America is sort of the front runner, but their pace of growth is a little bit more measured
Exactly, yeah, compared to what we're seeing globally.
than the global trend. All right, so let's drill down into North America a little bit more.
Okay.
The report mentions the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Yeah,
So within North America, the U.S. is the dominant force,
it is.
with a market size of 3,742.54 million US dollars in 2025
Wow.
and a projected CGR of 10.8%.
Okay.
Canada follows with a market size of 569.21 million and a slightly higher CGR of 11.8%.
Okay.
And then Mexico has a market size of 431.65 million and a CGR of 11.5%.
So the U.S. is really the major engine.
Yeah, it's the powerhouse
Yeah.
in that region.
Yeah, and that makes sense when we think about the scale of the U.S. economy and,
Absolutely.
their healthcare sector.
Yeah, huge market.
So what are the factors that are contributing to North America's leading position in this market?
Well, the report highlights a few things.
Okay.
One is a growing awareness of natural medicine among the public,
Okay.
and then also an increasing desire for people to have, more personalized healthcare approaches.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, in North America, a real preference for holistic treatments
Right.
and a really well-developed healthcare system. So those things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and they have high disposable incomes.
Right. Yes.
In that region, generally speaking.
Yeah, so that plays a role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then another factor is just the availability of these products.
Okay.
So it's easy for people to find them in stores through various retail channels online.
Right. It makes sense.
So that accessibility is a significant driver. Yeah, definitely convenient access can really fuel a market.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's move on to Europe.
Okay.
They were also noted as having a considerable market share.
Yeah, Europe accounts for over 30% of the global homeopathy product market.
Wow.
With a market size of $3,717.80 million US dollars in 2025.
Wow, almost the same as North America.
Yeah, it's very close.
Yeah.
And the projected CAGR is 11.6%
Okay.
from 2025 to 2033, so just a bit below the global average.
So still a very significant player.
Oh, absolutely.
Which countries within Europe are kind of the leaders?
Well, a few key markets stand out.
Okay.
The United Kingdom has a market size of 624.59 million US dollars.
Okay.
And a strong CAGR of 12.4%.
Mm-hmm.
And the report suggests that that's partly due to supportive government policies.
Okay.
Germany is another large market, 736.12 million US dollars, and an 11.8% CAGR.
Okay.
And that could be influenced by their aging population.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then we have France.
Yeah.
Market size of 342.04 million, 10.8% CAGR. Italy, 319.73 million, 11% CAGR.
Okay.
Russia, 576.26 million.
Wow.
10.6% CAGR.
Right.
And Spain, 304.86 million, 10.7% CAGR.
So quite a few countries in Europe are really
It is, yeah.
contributing to that market share.
Yeah, it's a real mix of significant contributors across the continent.
So it sounds like it's a really well-established market in Europe.
It is, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the report points to a couple of factors.
Okay.
One is that homeopathy has a really long history in many European countries.
Right.
You know, it's been practiced there for a long time.
Yeah.
There's also a significant level of public understanding and acceptance of homeopathic treatments,
Okay.
along with, a notable demand for natural alternatives to conventional medicine.
Yeah, it seems like they've really embraced it.
They have, yeah. And then another factor is just the widespread availability of these products in pharmacies all throughout Europe.
So easy access.
Yeah, it definitely contributes to their use.
Makes sense. So we've got North America, we've got Europe as the current kind of powerhouses.
Right, the big players.
What about other regions? Asia-Pacific was highlighted as having a really rapid growth rate.
Yes, Asia-Pacific is really interesting.
Okay.
They currently hold around 23% share of the global market.
Okay.
With a size of 3,076.80 million US dollars in 2025.
Okay, so not quite as big as the other two.
No, but here's what's really compelling.
Okay.
Their projected CAGR is the highest among all regions at 15.5%.
Wow.
From 2025 to 2033.
That's a huge growth rate.
It is. That indicates, a really dynamic and rapidly expanding market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So which countries in that region are kind of driving this phenomenon?
Well, a few key markets are contributing.
Okay.
We've got China leading the region with a market size of 1,292.26 million US dollars.
Wow.
And a 15% CAGR. And the report attributes that partly to just the presence of major players in the market.
Okay.
And then Japan follows with 424.60 million and a 14% CAGR. South Korea with 369.22 million and a 14.6% CAGR. The report also mentions increasing healthcare facilities in India, which kind of aligns with their substantial market size, 307.68 million, and a very high CAGR of 17.4%.
Wow.
And then Australia is also showing strong growth, 159.99 million and a 14.8% AGR.
So it's a lot of different countries that are contributing.
It is, yeah. It's quite a few countries contributing to that impressive regional growth.
Yeah. So what's driving this rapid expansion in Asia-Pacific?
Well, the report points to a couple of key factors.
Right.
One is rising disposable incomes across the region.
That makes sense.
So more individuals have, the financial capacity to explore different healthcare options.
Right.
There's also a growing level of consumer knowledge and awareness regarding natural treatment, so people are becoming more informed.
Yeah, they're doing their research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in countries like China and India, homeopathy has a very long-standing tradition, which definitely contributes to its ongoing popularity.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's interesting interesting to think about, is this rapid growth in Asia Pacific kind of indicative of a broader shift in healthcare preferences
Yeah, it's a good question.
in those regions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
are people moving more towards these types of treatments?
Yeah,
It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
absolutely. So moving on to other parts of the world, South America was mentioned as having a pretty good growth rate as well.
Yes, South America currently holds over 5% of the global market share,
Okay.
with a market size of $487.16 million US dollars in 2025.
Okay.
And their projected CAGR is 13.3% from 2025 to 2033.
So that's quite robust.
It is, yeah, it suggests good growth potential there.
Yeah, which countries are the main players in that region?
Well, Brazil is the largest market,
Okay.
208.5 million US dollars, and a CAGR of 13.9%.
Okay.
And the report notes that they're seeing an expanding homeopathy sector.
Okay.
And then Argentina follows with 81.84 million and an even higher CAGR of 14.2%.
Wow.
And that's linked to increasing healthcare awareness among the population.
Okay, so it seems like Brazil and Argentina are kind of the ones to watch there.
Yeah, definitely the key players in that region.
So what's driving the growth in South America?
Well, the report indicates that, ongoing investments in healthcare infrastructure across the region
Sure.
are a big factor.
That makes sense.
So they're putting more resources into healthcare,
Yeah.
which is helping to drive growth.
Yeah.
Additionally, there's a growing preference among consumers for natural healthcare options.
Right.
And as we mentioned with Argentina, that increasing healthcare awareness
Yeah.
is also playing a role.
Makes sense. And that suggests a developing market with increasing consumer engagement.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so what about the Middle East? What's the situation there?
Okay, so the Middle East currently has a smaller market share,
Okay.
around 2% of the global total,
Okay.
with a size of $512.80 million US dollars in 2025.
Okay.
But their projected CAGR is quite strong at 13.9% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, so even though they're starting from a smaller base,
Yeah.
they have a lot of potential for growth.
Yeah, exactly.
So which countries in the Middle East should we be paying attention to?
Well, Saudi Arabia is the largest market,
Okay.
180.51 million US dollars, and a KGR of 14.2%.
Okay.
UAE follows with 105.64 million and a 14.4% CAGR. And Turkey has a market size of 41.02 million with a 14.5% CAGR.
Yeah.
And the report notes that growth in Turkey could be driven by the rising prevalence of chronic diseases.
Okay, that makes sense. So it seems like there are a few key countries in the Middle East that are
Yeah, definitely showing.
poised for strong growth.
Yeah, some strong growth there.
What's causing that? What are the underlying reasons?
Well, the report points to a couple of things.
Okay.
An increasing understanding and acceptance of alternative medicine in the region.
Okay.
And also a growing desire among consumers for more holistic healthcare approaches.
Yeah, so it seems like their healthcare choices are broadening.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so finally, let's look at Africa.
Okay.
What's going on in that market?
So Africa currently has the smallest share of the global market, around 1%,
Okay.
with a size of 292.04 million US dollars in 2025.
Okay.
But it still shows a pretty respectable projected CGR of 12.9% from 2025 to 2033.
So still growth happening,
Oh, yeah, definitely still grow.
even though it's starting from a smaller base.
Right.
Which countries are the most significant in this market?
Well, South Africa leads the way
Yeah.
with a market size of 99.28 million US dollars and a CGR of 13.8%.
Okay.
Nigeria follows with 22.56 million and a 13.1% CGR. And the report notes that there's increasing R&D investment in the healthcare sector in Nigeria.
So that's encouraging.
It is, yeah.
What are the factors that are driving the growth in the African market?
Well, the report suggests a growing interest in natural healthcare options among the population
Okay.
and also an increasing trend towards preventative healthcare.
Okay, so taking a more proactive approach.
Exactly, and that could be contributing to the adoption of homeopathy products.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that market develops as healthcare infrastructure continues to improve.
Yeah, definitely a lot of potential there.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground geographically.
We have a lot of different regions.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how the market dynamics vary from place to place.
It is. Yeah, it's really interesting.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the types of products that are being sold.
Okay.
So the report has a product type analysis.
It does.
What did you find most interesting there?
Well, according to the report, dilutions are likely to remain the dominant product type
Okay.
in the homeopathy market. And this is attributed to their widespread use
Hmm.
across various health conditions,
Okay.
the perception that they're safe and effective,
Right.
and their ability to be tailored to an individual's health needs.
Yeah, for those who may be listening who aren't as familiar with homeopathy,
Right?
can you just give a really quick explanation of what dilutions are?
Yeah, so homeopathy is based on this principle of like cures, and it uses highly diluted substances that are believed to stimulate the body's healing processes.
Okay.
And so the products that we're discussing today
Hmm.
range from these highly diluted remedies to more kind of readily available forms like tablets and
Okay.
topical applications.
Okay, so dilutions are kind of a core
Yeah,
aspect
they're a core aspect of homeopathy.
of homeopathy.
Mhm.
Okay, but the report also identifies another segment as having the fastest growth.
That's right. Tablets are identified as the fastest growing segment.
Interesting.
And this is attributed to their accuracy in dosing,
Okay.
their ease of use and convenience for consumers,
Hmm.
as well as, their portability and longer shelf life compared to liquid formulations.
Right.
So, the increasing demand for these easily accessible homeopathic treatments,
Yeah.
especially, for people who have busy lifestyles,
Right.
is fueling this expansion. So it makes you wonder if this trend towards tablets
Yeah.
reflects kind of a desire for convenience in natural medicine,
Right.
which is something we're seeing.
Mirroring other areas of healthcare.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's interesting how those trends are kind of converging.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, so we've got dilutions holding the largest share currently, but tablets are really gaining traction.
Exactly, yeah.
So what about the applications of these products?
Okay.
What are people using them for?
Well, the report indicates that the immunology segment
Okay.
currently holds the largest market share in terms of application.
Okay, so people are using these products to
Yeah, to support their immune system.
boost their immunity.
Exactly. And this is driven by, a growing recognition of homeopathy's potential to do that.
Hmm.
And this has been, particularly amplified by all the recent global health events.
Right. People are much more aware of their immune systems now than
Absolutely.
they were a few years ago.
It's top of mind for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the largest segment in terms of applications. But is there any particular application that's experiencing rapid growth?
Yes, the analgesic and antipyretic segment is expanding at a really fast pace.
So what does that mean in plain English?
Yeah. So that means that more and more consumers are looking for natural remedies
Right.
to manage pain and fever.
Okay.
And so homeopathic options in this area are really appealing to people
Mhm.
because they're perceived as being effective.
Okay.
They have, a lower incidence of side effects.
The conventional medications.
Exactly, compared to conventional medications.
All right.
And there's just this general preference that we're seeing for more natural approaches
Yeah.
to these really common ailments.
Yeah, so it seems like people are really looking for ways to manage their pain and fever naturally.
Absolutely, yeah.
And homeopathy is kind of fitting that bill.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about where these products actually come from.
Okay.
The source of the ingredients.
Right.
The report has a section on source analysis.
It does.
What were your main takeaways from that?
Well, the plant segment currently holds the largest market share as a source, so plant-based components are really extensively used in homeopathic preparations,
Mm-hmm.
and they're valued for their therapeutic properties,
Right.
their inherent healing capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
and also just the increasing consumer preference
Yeah.
for natural, sustainable, and organic ingredients.
It's a trend we see across so many different
It is, yeah,
consumer markets now.
absolutely, and it aligns with that long history of using plants for medicinal purposes.
Right.
That's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so plants are the dominant source. But is there anything that's experiencing rapid growth in terms of the source of these ingredients?
Yes, minerals are identified as the fastest growing source segment.
Minerals interesting?
Yeah, and their increasing use in treating a variety of ailments is driving that growth.
Like what kinds of ailments?
Well, things like chronic conditions,
Ah.
stress-related issues, skin problems.
Interesting.
So mineral-based homeopathic treatments are gaining popularity,
Okay.
and that's because they're perceived as being safe. Okay.
Effective and having minimal side effects.
Yeah, so it's appealing to consumers who are looking for those natural and non-invasive therapies.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to see both, the dominance of plant-based ingredients, but also the growing significance of minerals.
Yeah, it really speaks to the diversity
Yeah.
of the sources that fuel this market.
Absolutely. So let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are the overarching market dynamics that are at play here?
Right.
What's driving all this growth that we're seeing?
Well, the report highlights a few key market drivers.
Okay.
The increasing global prevalence of chronic illnesses
Okay.
is a big one.
Makes sense.
As people are looking for ways to manage these long-term health conditions,
Right.
they're turning to complementary therapies,
Right.
like homeopathy.
Yeah.
Another major driving force is that growing consumer interest in natural remedies.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot today.
We have. Yeah, it's a major trend.
Yeah. And then finally, rising disposable incomes in many regions around the world
Right.
are enabling more people to afford
Yeah.
and explore these types of healthcare options.
It's a really interesting convergence of, health needs, consumer preferences, and economic factors.
It is, yeah, it's all coming together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So are there any factors that might be hindering the market's growth?
Well, the report does mention a couple of restraints.
Okay.
One is strict regulations
Okay.
governing the production and sale of homeopathic products in certain regions.
So that can create some roadblocks?
It can, yeah. And then another factor is, the ongoing discussion and the perception by some of a lack of extensive scientific validation
Okay.
and large-scale clinical evidence for the effectiveness of homeopathy.
Right. So that can definitely impact
Well, it can.
wider adoption.
Yeah,
So that's something to keep in mind.
definitely.
Okay. So we've talked about drivers. We've talked about restraints. What about trends? What's changing in this market?
Well, the report highlights a couple of notable trends.
Okay.
One is the growth of digital marketing platforms and online retail,
Okay.
which is really increasing the accessibility of these products to a wider range of consumers.
Yeah, makes sense.
We're also seeing a growing societal emphasis on lifestyle and wellness,
Right.
which naturally aligns with, the principles and appeal of homeopathic treatments.
Yeah, it seems like a natural fit.
It does, yeah.
Okay, so the market is adapting to kind of these modern consumer
Yeah,
behaviors
exactly.
and values. All right, so let's talk about the companies that are active in this market.
Okay.
What's the competitive landscape look like?
Well, the report describes the homeopathy product market as highly competitive.
Yep.
There are a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises
Mm-hmm.
alongside well-established international corporations.
So it's a mix of big and small.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And they're all, competing to strengthen their position in the market.
So what are the key areas of focus for these companies?
Well, they're really focused on maintaining rigorous quality control,
Okay.
ensuring full regulatory compliance,
Mhm.
driving innovation in product development.
Right, so coming up with new and better products.
Exactly.
Right.
And expanding their distribution network so they can reach more consumers.
Yeah, so it's a real mix of both, those smaller niche players
Right.
and those larger, more established companies,
Yeah,
all kind of vying for market share.
absolutely.
So in that environment, what are some of the strategies for success?
Well, the report emphasizes the importance of a strong brand reputation
Yeah,
and high levels of consumer trust.
makes sense.
Given the nature of homeopathic products,
Right.
consumers often rely on brand recognition and
Yeah.
positive past experiences.
Yeah, if they've had a good experience with a certain brand, they're more likely to stick with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Strategic partnerships, mergers, and collaborations
Right.
are also really important for growth
Yeah.
and expanding market reach. And as we touched on earlier, the increasing prevalence of digital marketing and e-commerce
Yeah.
is a big factor
Yeah.
in enhancing market accessibility and just intensifying that competition overall.
Yeah, it seems like a really dynamic market.
It is. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, so the report even provides some examples of recent activities by a key player,
Oh,
Aboyron.
okay.
Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so Boren is a well-known manufacturer in the homeopathy sector,
Okay.
and they've been quite active.
Yeah.
So in January 2025, their Camellia Tummy liquid dosages
Hmm.
won an award at the NACDS Total Store Expo Product Showcase
Wow.
in the baby care category. So
Great.
just, great recognition within the retail industry.
Absolutely.
And then earlier in February 2024, their Chestal Kids Honey
Mm-hmm.
and Allergy Calm Kids Pellets
Okay.
won Mom's Choice Gold Awards.
Wow.
So really highlighting their appeal to families.
Yeah.
And then in November 2024, Boren introduced new Arnicare Wellness Kits. And these are designed as kind of comprehensive solutions for sleep pain and stress management.
So kind of branching out into more of the wellness
Exactly.
market.
Moving into those broader wellness offerings.
Interesting.
So these examples show that there's a lot of ongoing innovation
Yeah.
and marketing efforts within the industry.
Yeah, they're not just sitting still.
No, they're really trying to keep up with what consumers want.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have a lot of information.
Yeah, let's synthesize it.
Okay.
What are the main takeaways from our deep dive into the global homeopathy product market?
All right, so I think the biggest takeaway is that the anticipated growth is significant.
Okay.
We're projecting a big increase from an estimated 12,820 million US dollars in 2025
Mm-hmm.
to over 33 billion by 2033.
Wow.
And that's driven by a strong CAGR of 12.60%.
Yeah, that's not insignificant.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Regionally, while North America holds the largest share currently, Asia Pacific is expected to experience the most rapid expansion.
Okay.
We also talked about how product forms like tablets
Right.
and source materials like minerals
Yeah.
are seeing really fast growth
Mm-hmm.
alongside the continued dominance of dilutions and plant-based ingredients.
Yeah.
And in terms of applications, immunology and pain and fever relief are key areas.
Yeah.
And finally, the market is competitive.
Right.
Companies really need to prioritize quality innovation,
Yeah.
building consumer trust,
Right.
and having a strong online presence.
Yeah. So lots of moving parts.
Lots of moving parts.
But really fascinating to see this global kind of pivot towards this self-directed wellness.
Yeah.